Give me that. Flying days are over.
Hey witches, it's Heidi from Channeling Spirits. Witches, sorceresses, the cunning folk. They've taken just as many forms as they have names, but in Western depictions, there are several traits people tend to think of.
How do you know she is a witch? She looks like one.
Witches are often green-skinned hags with a broom, pointy hat, cauldron, usually accompanied with a cat.
Okay, if you're a witch, where's your black hat and broom, and how come you're out when it isn't even Halloween?
But how did we come to this specific image as shorthand? To answer that, we'll have to peer into our crystal ball. One of the earliest witches is debatably not even a witch. The Witch of Endor in 1 Samuel 28 of the Hebrew Bible should more accurately be described as a medium.
I'm sensing an A. Does your name begin with an A?
No.
K-L-M-N-O-P?
Peter! My name's Peter!
Is your name Peter?
Wow, you are some kind of sorcerer.
A more literal Hebrew translation is a woman possessor of an Ob at Endor. An Ob may have been a ritual pit used for necromancy. Not the modern idea of raising the physical dead, but raising the spirit of a person to speak with them. Divination may have been where the English word witch came from. It derives from the Old English word wickian, which applied to both males and females.
Are they men or women?
Jacob Grimm, famous folklorist and co-author of Grimm's fairy tales, was also a professor and philologist. He connected the Ingvainic word wiccan and the Proto-Indian European week, meaning to separate, to divide, probably referring to the Germanic practices of cleromancy. The ancient Greeks believed in the mire, or fates, 3 women who ensured every mortal and god lived out the destiny assigned to them. Clotho spun the thread of life, Lachesis measured it, and Atropos cut it.
We know everything. Past, present, and future. Indoor plumbing. It's gonna be big.
These 3 shouldn't get confused with the triple-bodied Hecate or the Graii, 3 gray witches who share an eye. Perseus held their eye hostage until they helped him get the tools needed to slay Medusa. These 3 groups are occasionally confused and likely help with the archetype of aging, divining hags.
Only bad witches are ugly.
Another famous trio who prophesied doom were the Wayward Sisters, sometimes modernly known as the Weird Sisters of Macbeth. They have perhaps the most famous witch's spell.
Double, double, toil and trouble. Fire burn and cauldron bubble. Eye of needle, tongue of shoe. Hand of clock that points at 2. This is the real thing, you know, right out of Shakespeare.
They mention a cauldron multiple times, a tool often associated with the witch. But where did that come from? In Greek mythology, the sorceress Medea had a cauldron of rejuvenation. The Celtic goddess Ceridwen brewed a potion of wisdom and poetic inspiration in hers. Cunning women would boil brews of folk magic and medicine for local villagers, and the cauldron became shorthand for them. Many Norwegian and Danish wise women would also have a copy of the Svardebok, or Black Book.
Because like him and her, and husband writing her name in his book with her own red blood.
According to folklore, it was written by Cyprian of Antioch, the saint of necromancers. In Germany, it was believed that cunning folk used white magic for healing and protection and were rarely subject to persecution. Those views changed over time, especially when barbers, surgeons, and physicians began to lose revenue to them.
Well, let's give her another bloodletting.
As Christianity grew, so did the belief that witches gained power from the devil.
Someone called the devil in that forest.
Who was it led you to dance around the fire?
But witches weren't the only marginalized group Christians believe consorted with Satan. In 1915, the Fourth Council of the Lateran required all Jews to identify themselves by wearing a Juden hat. This horned skullcap became a target for anti-Semitism. Artists would paint devils whispering spells to Jews in high-peaked hats. Ooh. In 1431, Hungarian legal codes demanded that first-time sorcery offenders walk among their peers in peaked Jews' caps. According to Gary Jensen, author of The Path of the Devil, Early Modern Witch Hunts, this might be where we came to associate witches with pointed hats.
Well, we did do the nose.
The nose?
And the hat. But she's a witch!
By the 1710s and 20s, children's chapbooks in England frequently featured witches with their famous headgear. Goya's eerie Witches in the Air has a coven floating with conic headpieces. But did witches actually wear them? It's hard to say because most women accused of witchcraft weren't witches.
If they're really witches, why don't they use their powers to escape?
That sounds like witch talk to me, Lisa.
Never mind.
Any woman who fell into ill favor with their neighbors could be put on trial for witchcraft.
We have an accusation by Mr. Corey against you. He states that you prompted your daughter to cry witchery upon George Jacobs so that you might buy up his forfeited land.
In 1484, Heinrich Kramer published Malleus Maleficarum, or The Hammer of Witches, a treatise recommending secular courts elevate sorcery to the criminal status of heresy. At the time, heretics were burned alive at the stake.
We have found the witch, may we burn her? Burn her!
While initially banned by the Christian Church, it gained prominence as the manual for dealing with witches. Witch trials overtook Europe, and between 1450 and 1750, it's estimated that 80,000 trials occurred, and at least 35,000 people, mostly women, were executed.
Well, that's 75 witches we've processed. That ought to show God whose side we're on, eh, Pastor?
Kramer argued that women were more susceptible to demonic temptations due to the many weaknesses of their sex. He believed that they had less faith and were more carnal than men. Instead, they were likely women with strong personalities who defied convention and became targets.
I am no witch, Father.
Such was the case with the Salem witch trials. In a case of
mass hysteria,
more than 200 people were accused.
Let us throw open the floor to wild accusations.
And there was Sarah Good. I knew it. Oh, bless you, Tituba. Aye, and Goody Osborne.
30 pleaded guilty, 19 were hung, 14 of those were women, and one man, Giles Corey, was pressed to death for refusing to plead guilty. At least 5 others died in jail. Many were convicted because they hath or consoleth with a familiar spirit. In European folklore, familiar spirits, or simply familiars, were believed to assist witches in their practice of magic. While we often think of cats accompanying witches, Sarah Good was said to have a yellow bird who would suck on her witch's mark between her fore and middle finger. It's weird. Cats, especially black ones, had an unlucky reputation.
Away, beast!
While they are the most common familiar, Harry Potter also showed rats, owls, and toads.
Trevor!
Harry Potter also updated the flying broomstick trope with the sport Quidditch. But why are witches so intimately linked to them? The word broom refers to a certain shrub used, while a besom was the tool that tied those twigs to a wooden shaft. Brooms were traditionally ubiquitous with female domestication. In Luke 15:8, he states, "Either what women having 10 pieces of silver, if she lose one piece, doth not light a candle and sweep the house and seek diligently till she find it?"
The Bible says a lot of things.
One custom states that when a woman was away, they would prop their broom up outside their door or place it up the chimney. Because of those, some witches were believed to leave through their chimneys. The first illustration of a witch riding a broom was in 1451, but the first person to confess they rode a broom was a man. In 1453, Guillaume Edelin was a priest living near Paris who publicly criticized the church's warnings about witches. He was tortured, repented, and imprisoned for life. But did they ever really fly on them? Well, cunning folk were adept with herbs and would create concoctions or salves. In these ointments were hemlock, nightshade, henbane, and mandrake. In small doses, they produce hallucinations and the sensation of flying. But why brooms?
If you're innocent, you will fall to an honorable Christian death. If, however, you are the bride of Satan, you will surely fly your broom to safety.
Just a heads up, this next part is not safe for work. Well, consuming these toxins could cause nausea, vomiting, and skin irritation. One way to absorb it was through the mucous membranes of the female genitals, and the easiest applicator? A household broom.
Notice how I ride side saddle. It proves I'm a lady of quality.
By the 19th century, witches had gone from healers to heretics and finally hags. In 1812, the first edition of the Brothers Grimm fairy tales was published. They wrote about several witches, including the one Hansel and Gretel met. She is described as having withered hands, and her eyes were red, and she could not see very far, but she had a keen scent like the beasts, and knew very well when human creatures were near. Later translations would describe the evil fairy of Briar Rose exactly like the classic witch. Just as 11 of them had done blessing her, a great noise was heard in the courtyard, and word was brought that the 13th fairy was come, with a black cap on her head, and black shoes on her feet, and a broomstick in her hand, and presently up she came into the dining hall.
I really felt quite distressed at not receiving an invitation.
You weren't wanted.
Perhaps the most famous witch is the Wicked Witch of the West, who first debuted in L. Frank Baum's The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. But the original book only gives a few descriptions of the witch. Rather than black, she might have worn white. As a munchkin explains to Dorothy, besides, you have white in your frock, and only witches and sorceresses wear white. The book also states, now the Wicked Witch of the West had but one eye, yet that was as powerful as a telescope and could see everywhere. Her hat is actually a golden cap with a circle of diamonds and rubies running around it. W. Denslow did illustrate it with its classic point. Instead of a broom, she carries an umbrella, likely to avoid getting wet.
You cursed brat! Look what you've done! I'm melting!
39 years later, we would see the Wicked Witch in her green skin. But why? The 2003 musical Wicked has Elphaba, a play on L. Frank Baum's initials, was born this way.
Like a froggy, ferny cabbage, the baby is unnaturally green.
The 1995 novel it was based on goes into greater detail, stating Her mother drank a green potion from a stranger who drugged and raped her. In 2013, Oz, the Great and Powerful, the Wicked Witch of the West, was originally Theodora, who ate a green apple to stop her heartache.
Make it stop. Would you like me to?
Which changed her color. But the original film probably chose the color because it looked good in Technicolor. Like the silver slippers in the novel, which were turned into rubies, the Wicked Witch's skin was changed to stand out. Since then, it's become another staple, like Frankenstein, of the unnatural. In the early 20th century, witchcraft became less taboo, while the cultural idea of witches lightened. Cartoons and comics portrayed them as playful and occasionally good. The idea of benevolent witchcraft was central to the formation of Wicca, which was introduced to the public in 1954. Despite what the chilling adventures of Sabrina may depict, modern-day witchcraft has nothing to do with Satan. Modern witches are rarely evil old hags, in fact, quite the opposite. I'm an example. In 1964, Bewitched debuted with Samantha as a beautiful witch, vowing to be a suburban housewife.
I mean, you're going to have to learn to be a suburban housewife.
I'll learn. You'll see. I'll learn.
The 60s also introduced Sabrina the Teenaged Witch, which was turned into a 90s sitcom.
Can you wait till I finish my milk?
Did the cat just talk?
Yes.
Like Shakespeare's Weird Sisters, Charmed featured a new trio of sisters.
The power of 3 will set us free.
Like those accused of witchcraft in the past, these women are strong, defiant, and no longer helpless.
Why is it when a woman is confident and powerful, they call her a witch?
Nowadays, anyone can be a witch, but it will always be hard to forget the green-skinned hag beneath the pointed hat, boiling a cauldron, and ready to take flight with her black cat and broom. But what about you? Which witch would you rather see more of? If you liked this video and think we deserve it,
Who's talking about witches? Give me their names and I'll make sure they stop talking about anything. Permanently.
please subscribe. A special thank you to all of our Patreon supporters who help make this video possible. Thank you, thank you. As always, keep coming back for more spooktacular videos. I'm Heidi with Channeling Spirits, and thanks for watching. What? Ah! For every name or word I have to look up how to pronounce, I eat a Skittle. So far, I've gone through a bag.